And I was telling you that a lot of these components exist in a lot of different types of malware. What types of malware are there? These are the types of malware. There are trojans, a trojan or a virus or ransomware. There can be computer worms, rootkits. There can be PUAs, potentially unwanted programs, or grayware, or PUPs, so potentially unwanted applications, potentially unwanted programs, grayware, same class of stuff. Spyware. There can be keyloggers or botnets or fileless malware. Let's take a look at some of these types of malware and focus in on what they do. Let's start with the idea of a Trojan. Like I was mentioning before, it is a program that has malicious code, right, in the inside, but it looks harmless, but it's going to cause damage. So what happens is the attacker creates that Trojan, and they have the attack software, the malicious files, they wrap it in an innocent-looking program, and then make it available over the internet, and the target of the Trojan opens it up, runs it. The Trojan can create a covert channel back into the command and control network of systems. The Trojan can just attack or transfer sensitive data, destroy stuff, all kinds of problems. So how do you know that your computer system, your device, has been attacked by a Trojan? Number one, you can have a blinking screen. You can even have a screen that flips upside down. There's actually a well-known piece of software, malware. It's kind of more of a joke, but it makes all the images on your screen actually melt, flip upside down, inverted, displayed backward. If you see anything like that, yeah, you probably are under attack. What else could happen? The default background, your wallpaper can change, or you can have web pages start opening up, pop-ups. I remember I was at a class like this because I was a system administrator, and I was taking a class to upgrade my skills, just like you are. And I was sitting in a local classroom of and an instructor was standing up there teaching, and I was using everything he was saying to. It was something where it was a piece of software that helped control my network, install other pieces of software. And also, while the instructor was talking, I was opening up browser tabs, and I was looking up stuff, and I clicked on a site, and all of a sudden, pop-ups started filling my screen. This computer system I was working on had no antivirus, and it took a long time to remediate that computer system. So yeah, pop-ups, web pages opening suddenly. Yeah, you may be under attack by some type of Trojan, or you can have color settings on your system changing, or maybe you have your antivirus program disabled. Oh man, you can't, wait a minute. I look in, the bottom right-hand corner of your screen where that little system tray is, and you look at your antivirus program and it's not there. It's not running. Oh, well, that's weird. So if you go to a antivirus website like avast.com, and wait a minute, you can't reach the site. You can't reach any antivirus websites. You may have malware on your system, or pop-ups with weird messages showing up on your system. You may be attacked by a Trojan or some other type of malware. So how do they use this? Number one, attackers will use Trojans to replace critical operating system files. So in your operating system, like for instance, mainly on a Windows system, under your C:\Windows Windows folder, System32, all that operating system information, you can take those and replace files with components of malware. So even though your operating system can still work, in actuality, some of those operating system files are part of the malware. You can record screenshots, audio, video, depending on the malware. You can co-opt the functions of that machine to send out spam, more malware. You can download other spyware, adware, other malicious files because of that beaconing I was telling you about before. Your firewall, antivirus can be disabled. Backdoors can be set up into the computer where the attacker has complete control over the system, steal personal information, passwords, security codes, encrypt data. Now, besides which one is it? This one here where the screen flickers or whatever. Most of this can be done behind the scenes with hardly a change in the operation of a computer system so that the attacker has complete control, but the user has no idea that some of this stuff or all of it is happening in the background. So if your organization has computer systems that have been attacked by a Trojan, very likely those Trojans are going to be using some of these ports. So this is just a slide that you can check out. Like Emotet, this has been around for a while, 2022, 80,443. Centespy, 11,000. Remote Grab, 7,000, etc. So what you'd want to do in your organization is scan to see if any of these ports all of a sudden become available or are in use. And if that's the case, you may be infected. You may have a Trojan running on that system. There are many different types of Trojans, including remote access. So these are actually called RATs, R-A-T, remote access Trojans, right? Backdoors, botnets, rootkits. So backdoors, rootkits, they give complete access at the root level or administrative level to an attacker to that system. And it's almost impossible to find the backdoor or the rootkit while the operating system is running. A botnet allows that system to be part of other systems that are being controlled by an attacker to attack other locations. E-banking waits till you go to a financial site and then attacks you. Point of sales usually going to be on a cash register. And really, these days, a cash register is just a PC running a point of sale application. And defacement, they change your system, they change websites, they do graphical changes to a system. And then we have service protocol and mobile for your phone and IoT Trojans and software disabler Trojans that'll take down your anti-malware, antivirus software, destructive Trojans that destroy data, delete things, crash your system, DDoS attack Trojans, again, making you part of that botnet, and then command shell Trojans, which gives the attacker the ability to get a shell, which would be a command prompt or a terminal onto a system so they can control part of the application, part of the operating system. So you're thinking, wow, that's horrible, all that attack and stuff. How do I create one? How do you create a Trojan? Well, I have the answer right here. Let's have a look. So there are Trojan horse construction kits. There are many of them. And the attacker can easily construct your own Trojan horse. There are many different tools that you can use. And the interesting thing is they're graphical user interface based tools. The Dark Horse Trojan Maker, the Trojan Horse Construction Kit, the Centespy Trojan Generator, the Batch Trojan Generator, the Umbra Loader Botnet Trojan Maker. So with all of these, you don't have to have a huge amount of programmatic experience. You don't have to be a perfect C programmer or great at any language. In fact, you just choose the option that you want. And then once you choose the options that you want, you hit Create Trojan, and it creates it for you. It's crazy. There's a Trojan called the thwart Trojan, and it's a remote access Trojan, or a RAT, written in Delphi, and it attacks the system by means of port 9871, a very common, well-known Trojan. What is a virus? Well, a virus is a sophisticated piece of code. It's malware. A virus is self-replicating. it produces its own copy. It attaches itself to another program. So what it does is a virus requires a vector. A virus cannot, in and of itself, like a worm would be able to do, move from place to place. So the virus requires something else, like another program or a computer boot sector or document, some way that it can attach itself to, or use some other mechanism to send itself from one place to another. So viruses and worms are kind of like biology. A virus requires a vector, it requires some way to be transported, whereas a worm will be able to infect a device right from another device, where you plug it into the network, and as soon as you do that, a worm will crawl out, so to speak, of the device it's in and infect other devices directly. Virus requires a distribution mechanism or some other way to spread it, but it does it very efficiently, just like in the real world. Viruses are transmitted through things like infected disks and file downloads and flash drives and email attachments and clicking on web links and clicking on links in chat windows and so on. So they have characteristics of ability to infect other programs, transform themselves, to try to evade detection, encrypt themselves, to try to evade detection, alter data, corrupt files, and make more copies of themselves, co-opt programs and other methods to send themselves to the next victim. So why would an attacker create a virus? To inflict damage on a competitor, to go grab some financial benefit, steal some money, find intellectual property and ruin it, vandalize it, even just prank someone. There are many different prank viruses out there. There are viruses that are written just to conduct research. In fact, one of the first viruses for Microsoft Windows, not Windows, but for Microsoft Office, was a research project. So what happened back in the, I remember it was around the 90s, early 90s. So 91, 92, 93. There was a time when Microsoft added a programmatic back end where you could do VBA, Visual Basic for Applications, to Microsoft Office. So it must have been around 92, 93 or something around there. There was a researcher, somebody who understood that this programmatic backend that Microsoft added to Office was dangerous. And back then, where there wasn't that much malware and there weren't too many viruses, it was very difficult for this researcher, this person who figured this out, to contact Microsoft. They tried to tell them, hey, this could be a problem. You need to make sure that you look into this. And they couldn't make Microsoft listen. So what the person did is he wrote a conceptual virus for Microsoft Office. And it didn't have a payload. In other words, if you opened it and ran it, it didn't do anything. But this became the concept virus. So if you were to go up right to open up a tab right now and go to Google or DuckDuckGo and type in concept virus space Wikipedia, you would see what I'm talking about. So later on, people said, oh, really? You can do that with Microsoft Office? And they took the concept virus and they put payloads in it. And from then, all kinds of Microsoft Office related viruses started filling the internet. Also, there's terrorism and political messages, and maybe they just want to damage your network. But very often, they want to gain remote access. So many different reasons for creating viruses. Now, how do you know if you have a virus? Besides your fever going up, oh no, that's just a regular virus. And in this case, on your computer system, you might have your CPU running so fast that other processes take time. So your computer's sluggish, running slowly. Maybe your computer beeps with no display. If that's the case, that's not very good because your system has been so compromised that your operating system no longer works. Or maybe your drive label has changed. Or maybe your OS doesn't load. I think these number 2 and number 3 are kind of related. Or there are alerts popping up saying, hey, your computer is infected with viruses. Click here to remediate it. And in reality, that is where you get the infection. Your computer freezes, or you get BSODs. You know what a BSOD is? Yep, that's right. The blue screen of death, where your computer just stops and it gives you an error code and white text on a blue background. If you're running a Windows computer, you can get files that are missing. You can get your hard drive is just thrashing away. You can hear it working at something and you're not sure what it is. It could be that you have a virus on your computer system, or you open up your browser and it freezes. It just stops. Oh man, your browser window freezes. Or there are other weird browser things going on. These can all be indicators that you have a virus. So how does a virus work? Now, viruses in nature are a lot different than viruses on computer systems, because viruses on computer systems are designed by people. All the different species and classes and subspecies of viruses, somebody was in a computer programming session making it. So that's what we have. The first thing, we're using a programming language or a construction kit, and then the virus is distributed and begins to replicate itself. Well, it gets activated when somebody does something. You do some type of function. You click on a link. You run up that program, and the code gets executed by going into your CPU and memory and running, and then the virus, hopefully at some point, will be detected due to the IOCs of that virus. And once it's detected, it's incorporated into endpoint protection, antivirus software, and assimilated into defenses. So the next time the virus comes by, your antivirus software will catch it. So users install antivirus updates, and it helps to eliminate the threat. So if you don't have a good antivirus program on your desktop, on your laptop, on your phone, you could be in trouble when a virus comes for you, and you could be the target of an execution of some type of damage routine from the virus. So how does a computer get a virus? Well, you can download a file. You can click on an email attachment. I've had some crazy emails in the past. Have you seen emails that they look enticing? They are wanting you to click on something. I got an email recently, just very recently, saying that I needed, by corporate standards, to update my Bitdefender, and that I might be liable for not doing so if I didn't click here. And it was pretty easy to figure out. You just take the link and look at it, and it's not anything to do with updates or anything. It was a bad email. There are other emails. Like, for instance, there was one that was going around, 2018, 2019. Some students recently told me that it's really going around in their location, but it's one that says it uses your email address, and it's from, let's say your email address is, or let's do my email address, kevinking@xyzcorp.com, right? It says from kevinking@xyzcorp.com to kevinking@xyzcorp.com. And it says, kevinking@xyzcorp.com, we have found that you have been surfing porn. We are hackers. We have access to your camera. We have access to your screen and your microphone. And we have recordings and screenshots of you surfing porn. Just to show you that we're hackers, here's some information about your website. You used to live at 123 North Main Street in Poughkeepsie, Washington. And they give you a couple of information about yourself from, places you lived or something like that. And it says, if you don't send us money, we will take those screenshots and the information we recorded and send it to every one of the email addresses on your address list, right? We're serious. We're hackers. In reality, it's just fake. But somebody can respond to that type of spam. There are emails that are being sent to people that are just as enticing, that don't just want you to pay money, but they want you to click on a link that will download and install virus software, malware onto your system. And they're getting more and more sophisticated. One thing that happened just a little bit earlier this year was there was a release of 800 million records from LinkedIn. So for people who have LinkedIn accounts, it wasn't passwords, it was data. So for instance, I have a LinkedIn account, you might have a LinkedIn account. And so in terms of what you're doing for projects at work, interactions with other people on LinkedIn, badges that you have, whatever you do with your LinkedIn account, that information is now out because of API issues with LinkedIn. And so somebody can use that information to concoct a very realistic campaign and entice you to click and get the attachment, and you are infected. Not good at all, right? Or you can head over to a site, which I don't recommend unless you are more of an expert, and you can put it into some type of a safe location, like a VM, firewalled off. The Pirate Bay. The Pirate Bay has pirated software. There are other places in the dark web and other locations where you can download pirated software. And maybe you think that you got away with the Adobe suite. Or maybe you do another piece of pirated software that has a cracked key. And instead, it's compromised by some type of virus. Happens all the time. Try not to steal software, and you should be a little bit more safe in that way. No updating. So you might not update your computer system because there are people who are paranoid, and they think that Microsoft is pushing updates to spy on them. There are other people who just don't get around to it, but either way, if you're not updated, you are open to attacks. Not running the latest antivirus application and updating that antivirus application, clicking on ads, clicking on things randomly, using a portable media that you don't know where it's been. You found it in the parking lot, like we were saying a little bit earlier, or maybe you find portable media in a location. One of the things that I like to do is one type of hacking class that I teach. EC Council has a cool little hacking device called the Storm. And one of my roles is to go around the country teaching how to use this hacking device, how to do basic hacking with the Storm. Well, as it turned out, one of my Storm classes, one of my students hacked me, and I didn't even notice. What they did is they uploaded malware into one of my, not a flash drive, but it was a USB antenna dongle. And so when you plug that antenna dongle into a PC, the malware works. So somebody had a good hack. And I didn't even notice it for probably about 1.5 years, maybe 2 years, because I hardly ever use that antenna dongle. Plug it in, and all of a sudden, the network goes crazy. And I'm like, why is oh, wait a minute. I use this in my Storm classes. Sure enough, one of my students hacked me. Or it could have been an attacker in the hotel that I was in or something like that. But it was portable media, portable dongles, anything that has any bit of storage capacity in it can be attacked. Connecting to untrusted networks, like I did in my Storm class, right? We use untrusted networks all the time. You could be in a hotel, you could be in McDonald's, you could be in Starbucks, and you don't know what the network is you're connecting to. You know how easy it is to create a fake network that looks just like McDonald's, Starbucks, or the hotel? And the attacker can use that to get viruses and other malware into your computer system. What types of viruses are there? Wow, there's a lot of them. There are boot sector viruses, file and multi-part viruses, macro and cluster and stealth and encrypting and sparse vector viruses and polymorphic viruses and metamorphic viruses and overwriting file or cavity viruses. And by the way, these are really interesting because they shove themselves into cavities in normal files where there's extra space, and they just hide out in those little cavities. And there's camouflage and shell execution and FAT. FAT is file allocation table. It's the low level of a disk, and there are not just FAT, but exFAT and others. Logic bombs means that it'll trigger when certain events happen, and there are scripting viruses, and there are email and armored and add-on and intrusive and direct action and transient and TSRs, terminate and stay resident viruses. These are viruses that are like, they run like a background process, just running all the time, waiting to attack under certain types of situations. Crazy, the amount. These are types. And then under each one of these types, there are huge numbers of viruses and even subtypes of these viruses. So you're thinking, wait a minute, so many viruses, how do I create my own? Oh yeah, it's time for you to create your own virus. Actually, this one is not that virulent or bad. It's just a general example. So if you look at this code over here, what is this? If you've never seen anything like this, if you are on a Microsoft system and you open a command prompt, there are things that you can type in the command prompt that are pretty interesting in terms of writing scripts, and so on. And this is one of them. There's a lot of stuff this does here, but the first thing it does is echo off, which means don't display it to the screen. But if you look at the very end, there is a command that says del, which is short for delete, whack windows, whack star. And I'm using the term whack because that's what we used to say instead of backslash. So what it does is now it says delete everything in the Windows folder. That's what the payload, that's what the goal is of this piece of this little scriptlet, this little segment of programmatic language here. So what are we going to do first? First, we're going to take that little piece of code. We're going to convert it to a game.com, right? And this thing called bat2com, which you can download and use anytime you want. And then we send game.com as a file attachment. Man, hey, check this new game out. And then the person hits the link, or actually it's going to be an attachment in this case. It copies itself to the batch files in the current directory and deletes all the files in the Windows directory. So there you go. You have a virus now. Go ahead and propagate it onto the internet. I'm just kidding. This is not a really crazy virus or anything like that. It's just an example. There are virus writing programs. There are virus maker tools that do far worse than this one. And this one would probably be stopped by many different mechanisms. So if you want to create a virus that's better than the batch file that we saw in the previous slide, there are tools like Delmi's Batch Virus Maker. This one is Behaven's Virus Maker, a software kit. Deadly Virus Maker, Sonic Bat, Terabit, and many others. This is a picture here of JPS Virus Maker. Let's zoom in on JPS. There's our zoom function. Look at all the stuff you can, disabling the registry, time, disabling group policy, locking them, look at the right side, locking the mouse and the keyboard, hiding the taskbar, locking the screen, muting sound. You can make the system hibernate. You can make it restart. It does a line on the bottom, or turn off. And you can give it its own name, right? After install, server name to contact, etc. And then, but when you're ready, you just click on the Create Virus button, and bada boom, your virus is made, and all you have to do is decide how you want it to run. So all of these different virus makers, very easy to create viruses that do even more functions than JPS, and use that to infect computer systems. The next type of malware we're going to talk about is ransomware. I bet you that you probably have heard of ransomware. What ransomware does is it will run on a computer system, and it will find all the file types that people commonly use for day-to-day work, and it will encrypt every single file of that file type. And then it will put a splash screen on your system that says all of your computers, I'm sorry, not your computers, but all of your files have been locked. And if you want your files to be unlocked, send us money, that ransom payment. So let's say that you freak out and you really need your data, and there's no way that you could think of to get your data back, so you send money to the attacker. The attacker sends you an unlock process. Your system is unlocked and you have access to your files. Now, I like this going down a different path. Here's the path I like. The attacker, it's email, or it's let's say I accidentally click on a link on a website and my antivirus for some reason doesn't catch the ransomware. The ransomware takes all my files and encrypts them, and there's a message. And what I'd like to say is, forget about you, ransomware attacker guy, and just reimage my system and upload my files from backup. That's what I'd rather do, right? Rather than paying money. But in order for that to happen, guess what? You have to be ready for ransomware. Like, for instance, one way to be ready for ransomware is there are some cloud storage solutions that will revert your files for you. So let's say that all the files that are used on a day-to-day basis are on a cloud storage solution. Like, for instance, Dropbox is one of them. And I get ransomware, it locks all my files on my computer system, it locks all the files on Dropbox, but everything's backed up to Dropbox. So what I do is I re-enter my computer system, reinstall all my apps, or have a nice image that already has everything done that I took yesterday. And then I go to Dropbox and I say, Dropbox, all of my files on Dropbox have been locked. Can you please revert to yesterday? And the Dropbox company says, hey, you're paying me $100 a year. I'll go ahead and do that for you. And they will revert the files to how they were yesterday. And now my computer system is back to where it was yesterday. And I can just tell the ransomware people to, you use the whatever words you want to angrily scream at them. So it's much better to be prepared than to just end up having to pay, which encourages them to do that to other people and companies. So ransomware, here's a pretty bad piece of ransomware called Dharma. It's dreadful. Dharma attacks through email campaigns. And there's a little ransom note asking them to contact the attacker, the threat actor, and pay in Bitcoin. So let's just zoom in on the Dharma example here. All your files have been encrypted due to a security problem with your PC. Yeah, right. It's not. The security problem is that your antivirus didn't catch this horrible malware, right? So if you want to restore them, write us to the email, and it gives you the address, and write the ID, and in case of no answer in 24 hours, so it gives you 24 hours to do it. You see it's kind of written in a stilted English, and using Bitcoin just shows you how to do it and get them what they want. There are, so many species, classes, subspecies of ransomware these days. Look at this. These are some of the families. Cerber, CBT Locker, Skibi, I don't even know how to pronounce it, Skibi, BitPaymer, Cryptex, CryptoBit, that one's really bad. CryptoLocker, that's also pretty bad too. Crypto Defense, all these are pretty bad here. CryptoWall, right? So these are pretty bad pieces of malware. I don't know if you or your organization have been hit by any of these ransomware families and have to make that decision. Am I going to start over from scratch, or am I going to cough up the money and encourage this system? It is sometimes you would call this a Hobson's choice. Neither one of them works. A lot of these malware, ransomware, attackers will focus on specific easy targets like municipalities, like small cities, schools, etc. So either way, it's very important to protect yourself from ransomware. The other type of malware I want to talk about is computer worms. Now, remember, in contrast to a virus, a worm will independently, it doesn't need any vector. Just like a worm in the real world, you dig up some soil, the worm says, oh man, you just dug up my house, and it crawls out of that and burrows back in. It moves by itself. It doesn't require something else like a biological virus would. Same here. It'll spread across the network connection. And let's go back here. See this ransomware? Ransomware is increasingly wormized. Wormization or wormize, these are new words to the IT English lexicon, where you take a program that only runs on one system, give it characteristics whereby if it's on a network, it can propagate itself through that entire network. So now, if somebody had ransomware and it appears on their system with something like this file, this splash screen that says all your files are encrypted, rather than just staying on one system, this ransomware has been wormized, meaning that now it's going to start popping up on other systems in the entire subnet because it travels like a worm rather than waiting for those people to click on a link, waiting for those people to download software. It just follows the network and pops up on other systems. Wormized ransomware is pretty bad stuff. So worms can consume available resources. They don't need human interaction. They have extremely powerful payloads. They can install backdoors and do many other types of malicious activity on computer systems. So those are worms. Now with worms, like I was saying, they're different from a virus. They replicate on their own. They are able to use memory, use ports, use the network. They don't attach themselves to other programs like a virus would attach itself to your email system, right, to email themselves out. The worm just needs a network. All it needs is a network, and takes advantage of all the transport through IP and TCP and transport protocols that are available on your network, automatically spreading and infecting the entire network. Virus doesn't do that. If you look at a worm, one of the first things that you might ask yourself is, how do I make one of those for myself? Right? If you want to make one for yourself, this is the Internet Worm Maker thing. Look, it's version 4. This thing has been around for a while. So if you want to make an internet worm, the Internet Worm Maker thing, and I would encourage you to make a worm in your lab, iLabs, right? You don't want to make worms and spread them on the internet. You don't want to be a black hat attacker. Rather, you want to use this just for research and understanding purposes. But look at all the different categories that you can put together and customize the worm on the Internet Worm Maker thing. There are other worm makers like Batch Worm Generator and C++ Worm Generator and even more. But if you are, let's say that you finish this class and you go into the Certified Ethical Hacker class, and then you pass your CEH and you become a CEH master, and then you go to CPEN. You just, after 3 or 4 years, you're pretty good at this stuff. And let's say that now you're a consultant and you're being asked by your client, hey, look, what we really want to see is if we're vulnerable to malware. So what we want you to do when you attack our system and study what the response is we want you to create a worm. We want you to use a worm. If you're going to do that, don't use Batch Worm Generator. Don't use C++ Worm Generator. Don't use the Internet Worm Maker thing, because your customer has endpoint protection And all of these batch worm or virus makers, they have TTPs. They have a little thumbprint where the endpoint protection knows how malware created with this looks. And so it'll probably be caught. So if you are a pen tester and one of the items that you want to do is create a worm or create a virus, you need to create a novel virus. Novel meaning brand new, never seen before. So you would get maybe a program in C. You can actually create a pretty good worm or a virus even in Python, but it's much better to do it in a much lower level language. And then propagate the worm in their network in something that you created brand new. In fact, you might want to measure the response time of the incident response team to a worm created by a worm generator and the response time of the incident response team to a worm created in C by your dev team for your crew who does pen testing. So bottom line is the worst worms, the worst viruses are the new ones that somebody codes and has never been seen before by antivirus, anti-malware, endpoint protection systems. Let's have a look at another class of malware, rootkits. The term rootkit, the root of the word rootkit is root. And what root stands for is the administrative access, the godlike access that somebody has on a Linux system. Rootkits are very special in that they hide. So if somebody has a rootkit running on my computer system right now, I wouldn't even know unless I did a scan for it. We'll talk about that in a moment. But it makes it so that even though that someone's doing malicious activities, has full access to my system or to a server or a host, they can get there at any time they want. Even though that's happening, I can't tell. If I were to do a Control-Shift-Escape and look at the details of every process ID, anything just using memory or CPU, guess what? I would not see the rootkit. And so what they do is they replace parts of the operating system calls, utilities, modifying them with their own versions so that they can undermine the security. And so a typical rootkit has backdoors, DDoS, packet filters, log wiping, so you can't tell that they installed the rootkit, IRC bots, and all kinds of functionality hiding out completely so it can't be detected. So the attacker gets to my computer by, for instance, looking around and finding vulnerable computers and finding out, oh, there's one, it's vulnerable, or maybe wrapping it in like a Trojan special package like a game, or installing it on a public computer through social engineering, making me click on something, or maybe a zero-day attack. They write their own code, never been seen before, and then launch it, and it might do privilege escalation, buffer overflows, or maybe exploit the Windows or the Linux kernel. But all of that, they want to get that rootkit on my system. Why? So they have unlimited access, tracking. They can mask other attacks. They can get access to any of the data on my system and potentially to other network connected systems. And they can actually use my system to store other malicious programs and use that to get to the rest of my network or other resources, or make my computer into a bot on another network. So rootkits can be pretty bad. So how do you know if you have a rootkit? We're going to look at some tools in a little while, but what happens is you need a good anti-malware software that can do a boot time scan. A boot time scan, your system reboots before your operating system loads. That is what you need to scan. So that's what a boot time scan does. Your operating system hasn't loaded yet. It can scan your operating system files, and it can scan memory, scan boot sectors, and so on to look for a rootkit or a backdoor, and that's when you catch it, before the operating system loads. Once the operating system loads, the rootkit or the backdoor is hidden so thoroughly that you won't be able to find it. Another type of malware is a PUA or a PUP. These are potentially unwanted. They're grayware. Sometimes they're called junkware. Often they don't do immediate harm, but other times they are potentially harmful because they will attract malware because of beaconing and other reasons. And so these are often installed when you install freeware. And you install the freeware, and all of a sudden you realize you have 2 or 3 other apps on your system that you really didn't want. And some of those apps can monitor, steal data, but mainly they're used for ads, maybe for downloading software through torrents. A lot of times they're used for marketing, or sometimes they can be used for crypto mining, and your computer system can mine some type of cryptocurrency because of a PUA, or even a dialer. They are contacting other systems. So it's very important that your anti-malware endpoint protection antivirus scans for and removes PUPs, PUAs, grayware, and junkware. Adware in particular will give you unsolicited pop-ups. Hey, there's a sale, buy now, 50% off. Goes on and on, giving you all these things. They're annoying. Ads popping up on your computer system, lagging your hardware, maybe even crashing your system, taking your browser to a different advertising page, adding a new toolbar add-on to your browser, slowing your search. You have been infected by adware. And of course, if you have good endpoint protection, it can remove that adware. Another type of malware is spyware. What spyware does is it's a stealthy program, and it records everything that you're doing, sending it to an attacker-controlled web server. Maybe that's how you got the infection even, and hiding so you can't find where it is because they don't want you to know, because they're spying on you. How do you get it? How do you get spyware? Well, you could do a drive-by download. So you go visit a site, and just by visiting the site, you get the spyware. Or it could say, you go to a website, download the website, and on the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, it could say, you've been infected. Click here to clear the infection. And then the user clicks there, and guess what? They get spyware installed on their system. There could be browser vulnerabilities, piggybacking on installations, trojans, browser add-on. It could be a cookie issue. And what it's going to be doing in the background, stealing your personal information, sending it to the hijacker, monitoring your activity, displaying pop-ups, redirecting your web browser to advertising sites, changing default settings, changing your firewall settings. It can do quite a lot, spyware, all for the purpose of tracking everything you do. Another type of malware is a keylogger. A keylogger can be physical or logical. In other words, there is a dongle. In fact, right now, if you were to open up a browser tab, go to Google or DuckDuckGo and type in the term keylogger. From keylogger, go to shopping. In shopping, you'll find a list of keyloggers. What the keylogger does is, irrespective of whatever, anything, passwords, usernames, anything, I don't care if you have a VPN, no matter what, because it's right there at the driver of the keyboard, anything that the person types will be intercepted by the keylogger. And so they'll get everything. And the keylogger records every keystroke. Some keyloggers can go beyond that and at regular intervals capture screenshots. Also, they can track activities, Windows titles, check and monitor every application that's launched, open and closed, online activity, offline activity, login names, bank credit. If you typed it on the keyboard, it'll capture it. If you're doing chat conversations, everything is recorded. Now, if the keylogger is a dongle, here's one of the problems. Is let's say that I work in a company, and every time I come in to work, I put my backpack down, and I sit at a computer system, and I use it, and then when I'm finished from work, I get my backpack and I leave. But my actual system, my actual computer, is underneath someplace or in a corner, and I can't see the back of it. Little do I know, but somebody stayed late after work who wants to spy on me, and they unplugged my keyboard, and they put in a very small little dongle, and they plugged it back in. So my keyboard is now completely compromised, and I don't even know. So here's one thing I would suggest is if you work in a place where you work in a cubicle, periodically pull your computer, and if it's underneath, get a flashlight or something, check to see if your keyboard is plugged directly into a USB port. If it's plugged into something else, somebody has been spying on you. So always check that keyboard. But you also could get a keylogger that's software, and that's why you need anti-malware or endpoint protection on your system to make sure that keyloggers are caught and destroyed. All right, so a botnet. A botnet is a collection of computers that have been compromised that connect to the internet and are controlled by an attacker through a command and control center, or C2 or CNC, command and control, and they're used to attack other systems. So you might have somebody that has a computer and it's infected and they don't know it, but it's being used to attack Microsoft or attack Cisco or a government or a competitor or whatever it is, right? So that's what a botnet is, little piece of software running on a computer controlled by a crime syndicate, a CNC handler, and attacker. So why do they use them? Well, they can use them to do DDoS attacks. A DDoS attack is a distributed denial of service. Denial of service means that we throw so much information at a service that the service isn't available. What's a service? Like a web service. A web server, the web server is no longer available because of the attack, consuming all the bandwidth of that victim. They can also use a botnet, use a sniffer to steal information from one botnet and use it against another botnet. So botnet against botnet. They can do keylogging because of the little botnet application that's running on that system and gather information. They can also spread new bots between systems, especially if the bot that's operating on that computer system is wormized. And there's that word again, wormization. They can do click fraud by automating clicks, meaning that if I go visit certain websites, it'll automatically click on stuff. And even do en masse identity theft of all of the computer systems that have the botnet running on them. Craziness. Well, there's another class of malware called fileless malware. Now, over the age of time that malware has been available, it is usually a binary. What is a binary? A binary is an executable file. And if you've ever double-clicked on a file and run that file in Windows, executed a file, that is normally how malware is put together. But with fileless malware, it doesn't require binaries running on hard disk, CPU, and RAM to run. Sometimes it's called non-malware. It infects legitimate software, so software that should be running. It's supposed to be running on the system. Legitimate applications that are supposed to be running on your computer system. It infects protocols that need to be on the system to communicate between other computer systems. And from there, it conducts its activity. So it's not running as an executable. Rather, it resides in RAM, only running in RAM. So it'll inject its malicious code into, like, for instance, something that you run every day, perhaps Microsoft Word or Flash or a PDF reader or PowerShell or JavaScript, things that normally run on computer systems. And often this is called living off the land. The malware is not a separate executable, rather it separates itself into multiple processes that are supposed to be on the system, and it runs from RAM. So why is fileless malware used in cyber attacks? Well, because it's very stealthy. Since there's not just an executable that you can find on the hard drive, it's very difficult to find fileless malware. And like I was saying, it lives off the land using default tools, default apps that are trustworthy, right? They're used all the time. And so it makes it much more difficult to detect and stop. How is fileless malware propagated? I bet you'll recognize a lot of this. Phishing emails. But there's more than that. Some fileless malware actually is wormized. It does lateral movement through networks and other contacts. It can manipulate the registry on Windows computers. There can be a legitimate app. The legitimate app has been infected by fileless malware. You download and install the legitimate app, and now you have fileless malware. They can inject the malware into running memory native applications that run natively on your system. Go to a malicious website or click on something that has a script. Many different ways to get fileless malware. How do you fight it? Make sure you have the latest anti-malware, antivirus software, and keep it up to date. Another type of attack that we've talked about before is trojans. But in this case, we're not talking about getting attacked by them or using them. We're going to talk about some countermeasures. So some of these are going to be a priori, things that you should have known already all through time. And one of them is avoid opening email attachments that are received from unknown senders. Also, harden your systems. What does hardening mean? Hardening means that, well, we have this thing called the surface area of attack. What is the surface area of attack? It's the sum total of every port, every program, every application, every protocol that's running on a system. Every physical port, every physical interface on a system. To harden that system, we get rid of, close, block, remove everything that's not essential to the delivery of the service for which the machine was designed. So for instance, if I have a host machine, it's my laptop. If I'm not running, if I don't need a database on my system, I should delete the database. If I'm not using a web server, I need to remove it. If I don't need port 7532 or port 5528, I need to block and close those ports. Whatever I'm not using, whatever is not needed, I need to get rid of and close. That's called hardening. And that's what we're alluding to in the second point, is blocking all unnecessary ports, avoiding accepting transferred programs from instant messaging. Clicking on those links. Don't click on those links. Don't call those phone numbers. So harden. There it is again. Harden, weaken default configuration settings. Disable unused functionality, including protocols and services. That's part of hardening. For viruses and worms, and virtually all of these types of infections, install good antivirus software, scanning regularly, paying attention to the instructions. If you're downloading files from the internet, avoid opening attachments. Have a good backup. Make sure the backup, if possible, is air-gapped. An air-gapped backup is a backup that once the backup is finished, it's no longer part of the network, part of the system, and it's removed. So for instance, very, very simple example. Let's say that I have a small USB disk. I plug it into my system. I do my backup. Backup is finished. Backup was successful. Maybe I might try to do a quick restore to make sure it works. Yep, it works. I unplug that from the system, air-gapped, right? So if I get infected, that backup won't get infected also because it's not even attached to any system. So make sure you air-gap it. There are more countermeasures that you can use. Like for instance, what about a rootkit? How do you take countermeasures to get rid of a rootkit, prevent a rootkit in some cases? Well, if you want to get rid of a rootkit, you really need to start from scratch, reinstalling your operating system and all your applications from a good, trusted source. Now, be careful. If you were imaging your systems, maybe the original image has the rootkit on it. Double check that. Make sure you know what that automated process that you use to install operating systems and applications are. Harden. Hey, there's that word again. Making that surface area of attack as small as possible. Harden it against attack, whether it's a workstation or a server or a device. Install good firewalls. Avoid logging in with administrative privileges. So actually what you should be doing on your PC, and what should happen with any organization on any server, is that anybody who signs in and logs in should log in with a regular user account. A user account cannot install software. A user account cannot add, remove, and delete applications from the device, but an admin account can. So essentially, you'll have two accounts, a user account and an admin account. Day-to-day operations, using Microsoft Word, going and visiting a website, stuff like that, you're a user. But let's say that you want to install a new app, and when you download the app, you double-click on it to install it, guess what happens? You get a UAC alert that says, I'm sorry, but you need to be an administrator in order to do that. And then what you do is you sign in with your administrator account, and then you run the install. That way, if you're logged in as a user, any potential rootkit, executable, binary, any code that tries to execute, you'll see it, and you'll have the opportunity to stop it from executing, because you actually have to log in as an administrator to allow it to execute. So nothing is going to stealthily install on your user account. So technically, on your laptop, on your desktop, on a server, you should be logged in as a user without any major privileges. For spyware, try and avoid using a computer system that's not entirely under your control. Like for instance, let's say that you and a roommate and a friend share the same computer system. No, don't do that, because one of them could have run into an area where they installed spyware. So try to avoid stuff that's not under your control. Adjust your browser settings for at least medium or higher in the internet zone to avoid certain types of spyware downloads. Also, suspicious emails, be very careful with those. Track your task manager. Periodically look at that Control-Shift-Escape I was telling you before. You can also get to the task manager by right-clicking on the task bar at the bottom of the screen in your operating system and click on Task Manager and check that periodically. Look to see if there's anything odd. Normally you won't see anything, but you never know. Check out your Microsoft configuration, and you're going to need anti-spyware software. So double check and see if your antivirus, anti-malware product actually does anti-spyware also. Most of the major ones do. What about PUAs and adware and pups and grayware and so on? What you can do is have whitelisted, trusted, authorized websites and then block the rest so you don't actually accidentally run into one of those sites. Also, read the EULA. Have you ever read a EULA? A EULA is an end user license agreement. If you haven't read a EULA, read one. Read one today. You can even look up EULAs online. What they are is an end user license agreement, and sometimes inside the end user license agreement, there will be little special gems. Like for instance, it might say, upon installing this software, and by doing so, you are allowing this company, whoever made the software, to install software from the following organizations for whatever purposes. It might say that right inside the license agreement. And since you didn't read it, you didn't know that you agreed to have pups and puas and grayware and stuff installed on your computer system. You agreed to it with that EULA. There have been many crazy things hidden in user license agreements. So when you have a chance, rather than just clicking accept on the EULA, say, all right, you know what, I'm going to take 5 minutes and at least skim this thing and look and see what it says. EULAs are a strange type of legal construct that you only ever see in software. Imagine this. Imagine that you had your stuff together and you're like, you know what, I'm finally going to do it. I'm going to buy a new car. So you walk onto the lot of the Tesla dealership. I'm just kidding, that's an oxymoron. But anyway, you walk onto the lot of someplace to buy a vehicle, and you purchase the vehicle, but before you can get the keys, they make you look at a vehicular driver license agreement. And you look at it, and it says the following. It says, the manufacturer of this vehicle assumes no liability for any manufacturing defects in the vehicle that may lead to any issues with the vehicle, up to and including engine failure, transmission failure, drivetrain failure, or any items located within or associated with the engine, transmission, drivetrain, tires, chassis, and it goes on listing all the parts of a car. And it says essentially that if it breaks, it's your responsibility, even if there was a manufacturing flaw due to negligence or due to lack of what it did. In other words, that's what a EULA says. A EULA says that if it breaks anything on your system, if there's a problem with it, it's you who's liable for it, not us. Can you imagine that? Let's say Ford produces a car that has a transmission that creates a spark with the fuel system, and like 40% of Ford cars like blow up and everybody has to dive out of the vehicle. No lawsuit, you can't, because you signed the end driver agreement with Ford, and they're not liable for anything, right? So it's really weird. It's kind of an inverse of normally we say, you know what, you need to make a good product. You need to make a good product, and you need to be responsible for that product. That's not how it is with software. Almost anything you can imagine can be in that license agreement. And so I would ask you to take some time now and then and read through the license agreement. A lot of them have a lot of the same legal boilerplate information, but sometimes there's a little jewel in there that if you had not read through, you would not have known. Just one quick example of that. There was a website that somebody I knew was using. It was one of those sites where you can upload a picture, and you upload the picture and you can like change the picture, put like women will often use it to put, you put makeup, and you can slap a hairstyle on the picture and so on. But in the agreement that you click OK on, if you read through it, it gives that company complete control over your device. Also, I've seen that in government websites, where if you use a piece of government software, a government app, it'll say that the government has complete control over your computer system, your local computer system. So again, very important. I'm just taking a little bit of time here to read EULAs. One other small area that's growing, and I hope to see it grow faster, is a EULA analyzer. There are a couple of them out on the internet. They're not very good yet. But what I'd like to do is take the text from a EULA, drop it into a little AI, and have it analyze it for weird stuff. But EULA analyzers are still not very easy to use or find or very good yet. But they will be fairly soon. So anyway, that's my whole spiel on EULAs. Read one now and then. It can help you with PUAs, PUPs, adware, and grayware. Avoid installing the express method. In other words, you can have the express or kind of the manual method. Go through the manual one step at a time, checking everything. And most of the time, you're just going to hit next. But now and then, like I was telling you with that piece of software I installed, you'll find something and take the check out of all the grayware boxes. This, number 3, is what happened to me. Install trusted antivirus, anti-adware, ad blockers. Have ad blockers integrated into your browser. Be vigilant about social engineering techniques. You know what? I am so bad with social engineering and phishing attacks that my office sent an email that gave me a directive to do something, and it looked like phishing. So there were 2 emails. One I didn't open at all, and the other I opened and ignored. And then later on, a second set of email came and said for me to do something, and I ignored that too because it looked very social engineering-esque. And then finally I got a phone call. Kevin, when are you going to do whatever it was? Oh, okay, that was real. I'll go ahead and do it. Because I was ignoring it because it looked like social engineering. So I've kind of gone to the other end to make sure I'm not fooled by these campaigns. All right, what about a keylogger? You need a pop-up blocker. You need to get rid of the idea of opening junk mail. You need antivirus, anti-spyware. You need a good firewall, anti-keylogger software that's integrated into your antivirus, anti-malware solution, or you can even get standalone anti-keylogger software and keystroke interference software that actually puts randomized characters into every keystroke so that even if you have a keylogger, they just get randomized characters. Also, if you think, let's say you think, wait a minute, that's kind of weird. Maybe I have a keylogger. If you're thinking that, then use the Windows on-screen keyboard. The on-screen keyboard, you can hit your Windows key and type in keyboard and click on on-screen keyboard, or just type in KEYB, and you'll get this. This is the on-screen keyboard. You can use it to type letters. I had a laptop once, and the worst key, one of the worst keys in the world broke. It was this one here. The 2. The 2 didn't work. This means if I ever had to type in an email address to log into something, I didn't have the @ sign. So I used the on-screen keyboard on that laptop for quite a while. Should have just replaced the keyboard. Yeah, this is available to use, the on-screen keyboard for a Windows system. And what that does is bypass the kernel driver for the keyboard. And so not many keyloggers won't even notice that they're not able to be used anymore. All right, other types of countermeasures. Fileless malware. So number one, you want to remove any administrative tools that you're not using. If you have desktops that are that have administrative tools, and those administrative tools are not being used, get rid of them. So for instance, you may have a organization that has a customer support department, and all this department does is answer phones all day. All they need is one app on their system that they log into. Get rid of control panel. Get rid of administrative tools. Get rid of everything on that box except for that app that they need every day. Why would you want to have those things sitting around so that fileless malware or other types of malware can invade them, right? So also use App Locker. What App Locker is, and you can do this through Windows Group Policy, is a whitelist. What that means is, let's say that I have my laptop, I'm sitting on it right now, and I want to protect it. I run AppLocker. AppLocker says, all right, what executables, binaries, DLLs, what's running on the system right now? All right, those things I will allow to run. And I'm not going to allow anything else to run. And then if somebody clicks on something and it tries to run in RAM, memory, fileless malware, it won't be allowed to execute because you have AppLocker running. So AppLocker is very good for whitelisting. There are also software restriction policies that are built into local policy in Microsoft Windows, but those are kind of older. You really want to use AppLocker if you want to restrict stuff. We also disable any other tools that are used by system and network administrators like PowerShell, Windows Management Instrumentation, WMI, PDF. Disable PDF readers. A lot of fileless malware makes use of PDF readers. Why? They can use them to run JavaScript. Run periodic AV scans, antivirus scans, to check and make sure that you don't have any telltale signs of fileless malware. Keep it up to date. Disable Flash. No more Flash. Flash is almost gone, kind of replaced by HTML5. And all these countermeasures can very much help that we've seen with so many different types of malware. Keep these in mind. Make sure you run all these countermeasures on your own systems, but also be prepared to do that if you get hired to or you're working with enterprise systems.